we need to start making more conscious material choices.
Set up an initiative called Make Fashion Circular.
It's a tsunami of change.
Hello and welcome to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's DIF, the interactive online event series that aims to share ideas and shift mindsets to inspire action towards the circular economy. I'm Sarah O'Carroll, the network manager for our governments and cities team here at the Foundation, and I will be your host for this session. Did you know that only 12% of clothing gets collected for recycling around the world, and 73% of all fibers that go into clothing go to landfill or are incinerated? That's pretty sad. Knowing these stats, I'm really excited for this session to explore how New York City and London are working to make fashion circular within their cities to improve clothing collection recycling rates in these two really big cities around the world. So we're going to be chatting to Sonia Park from the New York City Economic Development Corporation and Catherine Kitchener from New York City's Sanitation Department to talk about the Where Next campaign, and Ali Moore from the London Waste and Recycling Board to talk about Love Not Landfill. But before we do, I want to remind you that this is an interactive session and we'd love to get your comments and questions throughout the session. So please use the comments box on the ThinkDiff website. We're also on Twitter. Please use the hashtag ThinkDiff if you want to get in contact with us through Twitter. So Sonia and Catherine, welcome to the DIF. After the Foundation launched our report, A New Textiles Economy, we were looking for partners to spark a conversation about what happens to our clothing after we've finished wearing it. And this led to the Where Next campaign, our partners and our partnership with you, the New York City. So why was New York keen to partner with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation on the Where Next campaign? Is it just about the low collection rates of clothing and recycling, or was there more to this?
Sure, Sarah, thanks so much for having us. So I think there's a couple reasons. One, we're a city agency, so we kind of know how to market, but we could really use some help with that. So partnering with Ellen MacArthur, who had connection to all the brands, was really useful so that we could get our message out there more. But the big reason is, if you could bring up my pie chart that I showed you guys earlier.
Yeah.
New York City has
we're going to pull that up quickly. So we're looking for the pie chart for New York's residential waste profile. Perfect. Here we go. Yeah.
Thanks. So New York City has a very ambitious goal of sending zero waste to landfills. And you can see from the chart here that 6% of that is textiles. And so that's about 200,000 tons a year of clothing, shoes, accessories that are going to landfill that should be getting diverted, reused, recycled, upcycled, all those kinds of things. And so we've developed programs for most of the pieces of the pie that you see there, but this was a way to focus on the textile piece.
Yeah. And is there more to it than collecting clothing and recycling? Is there anything else about why a city like New York would want to do this campaign? Sonia, I don't know if you have anything else to add there.
Yeah, sure. So New York City's Economic Development Corporation, or NYCEDC, is responsible for shaping the economic growth of the city and creating good paying jobs for New Yorkers. And so we oftentimes make investments in certain areas of industry, not just fashion or circular economy, but also other areas like health and life science, cybersecurity, as well as new technologies. And so we saw a really incredible opportunity, being a global capital of fashion, to really try to do something in this area as well. And so we brought together these partners that we thought would be really integral in order to make an impact. And so I think we wanted to do something with sustainability. We invest in fashion pretty heavily with buildings, as well as our space, as well as land development and manufacturing, as well as in the design community. And so this is something that we knew was important and we would have wanted to start working in terms of circular economy. So it seemed natural that we would work with Ellen MacArthur Foundation and the Department of Sanitation.
Great. And so the Where Next campaign, do you want to just tell us a little bit about what the campaign was, when it was launched, how it worked, how long it ran for?
Yeah, sure. So the Where Next campaign was a consumer-facing campaign where we created a marketing opportunity with ads that we had on Link NYC, which is a digital asset that throughout the city, as well as bus terminals. We also activated through all of our social media channels, DSNY, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, EDC, as well as the partner brands. And so basically this was asking consumers, New York City residents, to recycle their textiles. So don't throw it in the trash. Swap it, sell it, reuse it, repair it, and or recycle it. And the one primary thing that we knew was that, recycling can be a little bit confusing, right? You don't know what is recyclable. You don't know where to put it. If it's not curbside, meaning in your building, where do New Yorkers put their recyclables, right? So luckily, Department of Sanitation was creating a map to say, this is where it's happening. This is where you can recycle. And I think Kate can kind of speak to a lot of that as well.
Shall we pull up that picture of the map now?
Sure.
Let's do that. There we go. There's so many points where you can drop off clothing and textiles in the city of New York.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
Absolutely. So as we started working with Ellen MacArthur on this project, we have a program called Refashion NYC, which is for high-rise buildings and commercial businesses who want to do textile recycling in their building. It's a really great program. You can check it out at nyc.gov/refashion. And it's a free program that we partner with a local nonprofit that takes those clothes and resells them in their stores around New York City. And so we have about 2,000 buildings enrolled in that program, but they aren't public facing. So we really wanted to create a tool that was useful for residents who didn't have the program in their building, residents who live in low-rise buildings, et cetera. And so we had a couple tools that helped us to create the map. We have a law in New York City about clothing bins. You cannot put a clothing bin on public property. And if you put it on private property, you have to register it with the Department of Sanitation. And because we had that data, we were able to put all those points on the map. And then the other piece that allowed us to create the map is we have a program called Donate NYC. And there are over 75 nonprofit organizations that sell reused goods to fund their missions. So places like Goodwill, Salvation Army, Housing Works, et cetera. And so we had all of their locations. And then with the help of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we were able to connect with lots of brands that were doing take back at their stores. So we added points to our map, additional points. So H&M, Zara, and other places that were doing take back. And so we ended up with over 1,100 locations in New York City where you could drop off your clothing for reuse or recycling. And so it really just showed that it's very easy to do the right thing with your clothing. And it's just, New Yorkers probably just didn't know about it. So we created this tool to make it easy.
That's amazing. And Scarlett Online also thinks it's pretty amazing. She said, wow, that map is cool. Could you give us some information on how many pieces of clothing or the kind of the volumes of clothing or textiles that were dropped off during the campaign?
Yeah. So we have, I don't know if you want to bring
we have our results page that kind of shows what our results are, but then also shows images of the or Link NYC, as well as the bus station terminals with the advertisements.
Okay. And some of those results, what do they look like? Do you think the project was a success?
Yeah, absolutely. So we saw, anywhere from like a 40 to 50% increase at some of the textile donation locations. And also we had partners specifically with Gap, Athleta, and Banana Republic to host some of our Refashion NYC bins during the program. And they collected just over 2 tons of clothing just at those stores. So that was really exciting. There are lots of other things going on at the same time, so it's hard to know like what was specifically the campaign. There was obviously the Marie Kondo effect, which was hard to quantify, and other things going on, but definitely it was a great way to bring awareness and collect more clothing.
Yeah. And the Wear Next campaign was, I guess it was like 3 or 4 months where we actually tracked year on year results that Kate was just mentioning.
Okay. And in terms of, I mean, in a city like New York, which just seems really, really big, it feels to me like you would need a lot of partners and resources to make this kind of campaign happen. I mean, is that the case? What kind of, in terms of actual resourcing of a campaign like this, what does a campaign need in terms of how much it costs if other cities want to run a similar campaign? What are we looking at in terms of financial investments and things like that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we actually spent very little on this campaign. I think in total it was under $4,000. And that was primarily to cover the cost of printing the actual advertisements for the bus stations. And, you know, I think one of the key things was really the partnerships, whether it was with the brands, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, or DSNY, right? I think from EDC's point of view, and I think we all share this, you know, we're, like Kate said, we're a government agency, right? So we understand that other people are great, we're great at things, and other people are great at things. And so we wanted to bring together this group who all had, you know, a way to participate. So EDC brought the group together. We convened DSNY, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and different parts of the city. We brought in NYC & Co., who provided the space and the opportunity for us to access the bus stations and the Link NYC ads. And then, you know, Department of Sanitation, as you've heard, created a lot of the infrastructure, or had the infrastructure. And so, you know, being able to recognize who the appropriate people would be to partner with on something like this was really critical. Ellen MacArthur Foundation, obviously, you know, as part of that organization, you know, you guys are really great at design, being thought provocative around this, pushing circular economy, having that thought leadership, but then also having brands as well as marketing partners to bring in that could help really move along where that was their strength or your strength. And so I think between all of those three elements, really being able to have those three was really a great opportunity for us. And that's why we were able to maximize something at such a low cost. But then, you know, I do want to say we all worked very hard. You know, we put in at least, like, I want to say 3 hours a week on the project. And so, you know, we're all dedicated to it.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point about the city's ability, and I guess also our ability as the foundation to convene the right people in a room to be able to move an action forward, and to using the strengths and day-to-day activities of all these different people to bring down the cost of a campaign like this, because we're just building it into what people would or what departments would usually be doing kind of day-to-day, and leveraging what different actors are doing for a campaign like this. I think I completely agree. It's that about knowing where you're going to get these resources from, and who's doing what, and then that really importantly that you also need you need people who are championing it, who are driving it forward, and who are making it happen. So that's such a good point. We've got another question online from Gary. He wants to know what happens to the clothes once they've been collected. Does that become a problem to sort out from the brand? So, like, is Zara then responsible for the clothing that's collected? Is it part of the city waste collection program? What can be done? What's done after the clothes are collected?
So the clothing drop-offs on the map are a mix of for-profit clothing stores, for-profit textile recyclers, and nonprofit organizations. And so depending on where you're dropping off, a different thing might happen. But so for the nonprofits, you know, they're sorting out what can be resold in their stores, and then they're using the money that they make from selling those clothes to fund their missions, be it, you know, HIV/AIDS, homelessness, any number of different missions that the stores might have. I'm not sure what happens with the for-profit clothing stores. I don't know, Sonia, if you know.
Yeah, I mean, ICO was one of our partners on the campaign as well, and a couple of other private recyclers. And I think that for a lot of the recycled materials that they collected from H&M and Zara, I think they turned some of them into T-shirts. That was part of our Donate NYC conference, or your Donate NYC conference, where you could then customize screen printing on them. But I think that they are generally, it's like I:CO, and they generally do a lot of large corporate take back programs, and then recycle the product.
Right. With any kind of textile collection, there's a sorting that happens, right? There's like the best case use, obviously, is to resell it locally, but you're always going to have some that's getting, shredded or sold to global markets or things like that.
Yeah. And in terms of the infrastructure available for recycling clothing and textiles in and around New York City, I'm assuming that's still not kind of 100%. 100% of what gets collected does not get recycled. Is that correct?
So, I can speak. Sure. I can speak specifically to our nonprofit partners that we work with. And so for them, they're trying the most to resell it in their stores. So it's probably about 30 to 40% of what they collect. And then a significant amount of it is being sold for salvage. And so that could be going to global markets or getting recycled for building insulation or things like that.
Yeah. And so I think there it's really important for us to just recognize that kind of the collection infrastructure isn't the entire story, that there's a lot of other work that needs to be done to make fashion circular within cities, and not-for-profits themselves. Kind of the resale market doesn't do that by itself. Ideally we wouldn't want to downcycle clothing and textiles into insulation and other construction materials and things like that. I know there are lots of other things happening in New York City around this making fashion circular in the city. Would you like to highlight maybe some of those other things that you're working on and maybe what's next after the Wear Next campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that we started last year is Refashion Week. And I have a slide if you guys could pull that one up about, there's kind of a woman on the left and then some text on the right.
Yeah, let's bring that up.
Yep, that one. And so this is going to be happening in February. It's February 22nd through the 28th. It's just after Men's Fashion Week. And the idea is that it's a week-long series of events. So it's upcycling events, clothing swaps, repair, things like that. And then at the end of the week, we're going to have a refashion show, which will be thrifted looks. So we have stylists that go to thrift stores and put together looks like the look that you guys see here. And the idea is just bringing awareness that you don't always need to buy new to be fashionable. And so, there's a lot of textile waste that's in the fashion industry. And I think you'll see that throughout, the regular fashion weeks that happen. And so this is just more of an awareness to bring around that you don't necessarily need to have something new all the time. And if you want to learn more about this, it's at refashionweek.com. We are definitely looking for people to get involved if you happen to be in the New York area. And we're pretty excited about it. And yeah, check it out.
Yeah, I think for EDC, part of what we do is manage and tenant 66 million square feet of buildings. So one of those buildings that's critical to fashion and one of the areas that's critical to fashion is in South Brooklyn. And it's one of our buildings called the Brooklyn Army Terminal. And I think we're looking at how to attract circular economy businesses there. It's light industrial manufacturers that are housed there now. The organization Fab Scrap is housed there, as well as a couple of ready-to-wear cut and sew and 3D knit manufacturers. And so I think being able to utilize the infrastructure that we run and manage to invest and support industry around circular economy is something that definitely has been started to be thought about and accelerated after Wear Next. And then additionally, in the next by 2021, we will have a pretty substantial development called the Made in New York campus that will be up and running. And that will focus, a large part of that will focus on fashion manufacturing. And I think being able to have a dedicated space where people can go to learn about these things, learn about the circular economy, business models, see how businesses are incorporating it into how they operate. That's kind of it's kind of like what EDC does and what they do best, to create mini hubs around industry that are really important.
Amazing. There's so much going on, and we could talk about this. I know I could talk about this for hours with you, but we need to also spend some time talking to Ali in London. So before we do that, we're going to watch a quick clip from the London Waste and Recycling Board about the Love Not Landfill campaign. So cool. Ali, thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's a busy time for Love Not Landfill. I thought we would start with Love Not Landfill. I think at first glance could probably seem like a same campaign as Where Next, but I know from talking to you that there are some similarities but also some differences. So maybe to start us off, could you maybe highlight some of the similarities but also some of these differences?
Well, I'm going to start with one of the differences. Something that Sonia and Catherine were just talking about, which I'm profoundly jealous of, is the fact that you had 1,100 locations across New York City as part of your Where Next campaign, and we have 20 bring banks like the ones that we just saw in the video, because London's collections infrastructure is so fragmented that we don't have a single waste authority. We have 33 collection authorities, an additional 5 joint waste disposal authorities. So we don't have the ability to operate on that citywide basis so easily here. So that's, I think, one major difference between us and New York is just our actual collections as part of this campaign are a relatively small, although really important part of what we do. The Love Not Landfill campaign is specifically designed to target 16 to 24-year-old Londoners around their fashion behaviours, particularly the way that they buy and use and dispose of their clothing. We know that from waste composition analysis that loads and loads of clothes go in the bin still here in London, and most of our waste and collection authorities do not collect textiles from the door. So we rely on people to have the energy, the passion and make the effort to go and find a local clothes bank. There's no single source of information about those banks. Lots of people take their clothes down to charity shops and things like that, but we kind of wanted to make it kind of sexy again for younger people, because we know that they're not necessarily taking the time and the effort to go and take their unwanted clothes down to clothes banks. So we've developed a campaign with funding from EU Life, as well as from the London Waste and Recycling Board, as part of the European Clothing Action Plan project, to target that particular audience and to try and get them never to throw clothes in the bin. That's our whole objective, never throw clothes in the bin. And we've done a whole range of very different things to do that. It's a combination of social media campaigning, which obviously is the best way to target that age group, combined with physical events, live events, where we can directly engage with people and get them to touch and feel clothes. combined with schools campaigns and talking with university students and fashion students, anybody that falls within that bracket really. And we've just run a whole host of different things over the past year and a half, 2 years around that.
So I'm sure the campaign's been running for about 18 months. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's been running. We've been active since April 2018,
Okay.
and we started off by consulting a youth panel. We recruited some 16 to 24-year-olds to come and tell us what they thought about fashion and how they handled their clothes and what kind of things they like to look at and engage with, so that we could get the tone right and get the behaviours and the calls to action right in the campaign. And then we kicked off with an event during Fashion Revolution Week in 2018, where we got a bunch of influencers to come down to a textiles recycling factory. We collaborate with LM Barry, a textiles recycler here in London, to operate all of our bring banks. And he kindly let us use his space, which is like an Aladdin's cave for people who like clothes. It's a treasure trove. And we got a bunch of fashion influencers to come along and spend the day with us, looking through the clothes that were available, styling outfits, and basically just showing them what the extent of the waste problem is.
We've got a question from Stuart, and alluding to what you said about 16 to 24-year-olds and they're all online. This is part of Stuart's question. So he says, these campaigns both have digital elements at their core. How valuable is digital technology in even making something like the Love Not Landfill campaign possible?
It's absolutely essential. It's the core of everything that we do. We don't do, so at the moment, you mentioned it's a busy time. We've got a really big pop-up shop running in Covent Garden in 7 Dials for 4 or 5 days over this Christmas shopping weekend. It's the beginning of our Christmas shopping period here. And even when we're doing something like that, we start off by thinking, how are we going to get engagement online with people about this shop? How do we use social media to get people to come down to the shop? How do we amplify what we're doing in the space through social media? And we start there every single time. So we don't just do an event for event's sake, because they're very costly things to do, physical events. You need to get the maximum bang for your buck out of them. So the ability to amplify what you're doing and increase your impact and reach through reaching people who may not be able to come down to a physical event is really vital. So for instance, with the pop-up shops that we run, we when we're working with charities, we pair up the charities that are selling their clothes in the shop with Instagram influencers who have really wide reach, with a target audience that we may not be able to reach by ourselves, that the charity may not be able to reach by themselves. And the influencer then works with the charity to curate a collection of clothes very much in their style. We ask them to create videos and content to share with their followers. And that's how we've been building our own audience through that means over the past year and a half. And it just means that we get fantastic engagement without necessarily having to do all of the hands-on work ourselves, but by mobilizing really, really effective influencers in the space. So yeah, I mean, it's vital. We can't operate without the digital stuff.
Yeah, I think we've got a picture of one of the Bambi Bring Back bins, and I thought it would be good to show this, but also if you could, just because the difference between you and New York, like you said, is that you have 20 of these bins, whereas New York has 1,000 plus collection points. And from what we've spoken about previously as well, that you've done some really great kind of research on what makes a Bring Bank successful, and maybe that would be useful to share as well.
Sure, yeah, well when we started rolling out the Bring Banks, which we did last in September 2018, we were putting them in, basically our strategy is to put them where the young people are already. Is not to ask them to go to a Bring Bank, but to put them where they're already going. So, university campuses or major shopping centres, or just locations where, it's a very popular place for 16 to 24-year-olds to hang out. And we got one into Topshop Oxford Street, and we got one into Ealing Broadway Shopping Centre, and we got them over a whole range of locations. And it's become clear to us over the period in which we've been operating these banks and collecting from them with Ellen Barry's help, that the best collectors the best collection points are in those places where people go back, they return every day or every week or on a regular basis. So, for instance, Ealing Broadway Shopping Centre, which is in West London, and we were emptying the bank there every single week. We're collecting quite decent amounts of tonnage out of that bank, and that's because it is a shopping centre which people make return visits to like 60 or 70 times a year. And so they get used to seeing the bank there, they remember it, and then the next time they go, they will take stuff back. So whereas Topshop Oxford Street, while it's a fantastically iconic location for us, and it's a really great symbol of the campaign to have it in that kind of space, it does tend to be a once or twice a year visit. It's quite a tourist destination. So different banks play different purposes. So the one there obviously is one that we've shared images of, and it's as I say, it's quite iconic for us. But the one in Ealing Broadway Shopping Centre is actually the workhorse, is actually delivering the tonnage. And yeah, there's a few other locations like that are working really effectively for us.
Thanks, Sally. I think all of these insights are just so interesting in terms of getting your bang for your buck, like focusing very specifically on a target audience and understanding them, thinking about how you're going to reach them and engage them and then get them to actually do what you're asking from them. So all of that is so interesting. Why is a campaign like this really important for a city like London?
I think the most important thing for a city like London to acknowledge at the moment is our impact on climate change through consumption. And, you know, so as a city, we might not make very much ourselves. Our scope 1 and 2 emissions might be, you know, comparatively speaking, not awful. We might be able to do something about electric vehicles or air quality or all of those other things that contribute to those emissions. But the thing which really we make a difference in as a city is the amount that we consume and the consumption-based emissions associated with that. So the scope 3 emissions. So every time we buy an item of clothing, there may not be very many carbon impacts within the city, but if you look all the way down the chain, the impacts all the way through the system mean that, you know, we've got this trail of carbon in our wake, which we need to do something about. So there's all sorts of ways that we can tackle that kind of consumption without being too hair-shirt about it as a city. We can obviously work through circular economy business models, which as an organisation we do with corporates and with smaller businesses to try and reduce consumption in the supply chain. But the point of a campaign like this is that we can also talk directly to people about, you know, great ways that they can reduce their consumption. The thing is, as a campaign, we always talk about the fact that we love fashion and we love clothes, and we are not asking people just to, you know, suddenly just stop buying clothes and wear a hair shirt every day. What we're doing is offering them alternative ways of consuming clothes. So making sure that they don't throw the clothes they don't love anymore in the bin, but that they pass them on, they share them, they swap them, they put them in a clothes bank, they take them down to a charity shop, they sell them on eBay or Depop or somewhere like that. And then that they buy more secondhand and stop buying so much new. I mean, the C40 report, which I don't know if everybody's had a look at, but it's about the consumption-based emissions impact of what we do in a city and what we need to do to keep to a 1.5 degree C warming, suggests that by 2030 in London, all of us will have to have accepted that we can only buy between 3 and 8 new items of clothing per year in order to tackle those consumption-based emissions way down the line. I think a campaign like ours offers some light and some hope and some glamour, you know, around secondhand clothing and around reuse and recycling, which is sorely needed in that context. So that's why we do it, is to try and help with that whole consumption picture.
We've got another question from the audience online from Dave. He's asking, he wants to know why he can't buy any new clothes. Like, why is this his problem? Does this really have to be about an individual's sacrifice? What about clothing being designed better? Shouldn't this also be something that the brands and clothing manufacturers are doing?
Absolutely. I don't think that it isn't just an individual's responsibility. there's all sorts of points along the supply chain where waste can be reduced, where emissions can be reduced, where efficiencies can be gained, where people can actually achieve greater sustainability. So there's all sorts of work going on, for instance, in textiles and materials innovation, where waste inputs are being used to turn into fabrics, so that we don't have to, extract raw materials from the planet, which is where a lot of the consumption emissions happen. So there are circular business models that more and more businesses are using. So we work with a number of businesses in this space. So people like, for instance, Full Stack Supply Company, who've launched an outdoor wear brand recently, which has got durability and an inbuilt repair warranty as part of the collection, so that you get a guarantee that when you buy an item, if it breaks, you can go back and they'll repair it for you for free. There are people looking at resale platforms, so they'll take back clothes that you don't want anymore and then resell them on and patch them, repair them, get them fit for use again. There's all sorts of different ways that businesses can contribute, but I don't think that as individuals we can necessarily just sit back and wait for business to sort it out. I think there's a responsibility for all of us to get involved in some way, shape or form. We're trying to make it as pleasurable and as easy to do that as possible through the Love Not Landfill campaign. And we hope that we never preach and never demand that people do certain things. We're trying to entice people into our pop-up shop at the moment. We're not trying to strong arm them. So
yeah. And I'm sure in a city like London, this isn't all kind of butterflies and roses. There must be some challenges along the way. Could you maybe share with us some of the challenges that you've had to kind of overcome?
Yeah, there's we've tried to achieve an enormous amount over the last 18 months, and we've done it with limited resources, although nowhere near as limited as New York City's, which I was very impressed to hear how little they've spent on achieving such a good impact. So resources and capacity is always an issue with a small organisation like ours and with limited funding. But I think we've used what we've had pretty well. And then the thing that I mentioned earlier, the fragmentation of the collections infrastructure here, and the fact that so I saw a slide recently from WRAP that said that only 1% of textiles that are collected for reuse and recycling in the UK are collected by municipalities, by local authorities. And that means that there's a whole bunch of private players in the market, which, while in itself isn't a problem, it does provide us with a problem in terms of traceability, in terms of measurement and data gathering around the textiles sector. So that's always a challenge, is to prove that we're intervening in the right way, in the right place, in the sector, because the data is quite difficult to get hold of. It's not as simple as some of the things that all of our boroughs collect. There's certain materials that they all collect from the doorsteps, and we monitor and have the data for. Textiles just isn't like that. And the other challenge, of course, is that we like to partner with as many brands and retailers as possible, as well as charities and third sector organisations and influencers and media and universities and colleges and things. And actually, sometimes it can be quite difficult to address this issue of consumption. But I'm sure that we're not alone in the fashion sector to have that challenge.
No, I don't think you're alone at all. I think I have one final question, both for you in London and then also Sonia and Catherine in New York City. If you had to give a city that wanted to replicate or do a similar campaign like Where Next or Love Not Landfill, one piece of advice, what would that be? And Ali, we'll start with you and then we'll go to New York.
My advice would be to collaborate with as many people as you can. That's been, we've achieved what we've achieved because we've collaborated with so many different people, so many different types of people and organisations, and we've looked for those who have real resonance with our target audience. So focus hard on your target audience, really focus on them, and collaborate with the people who will deliver to that target audience.
Fantastic. Sonia and Catherine, over to you. Any thoughts on what advice you would offer cities who wanted to do something similar?
Yeah, I think, kind of similar to what Ali was saying, picking the right partners and making sure that you all communicate and speak to each other about what you're capable of doing, and what is possible, what your bandwidth looks like. Additionally, I think, making sure when you're talking to your partners that you understand what their timelines are, because their timelines might be different than yours. I think for us, it would have been great to have had in-store activations as well, with visuals like in the windows, so that more people can kind of see everything on the street level. And so, that was just a matter of time and making sure that we engaged with the brands earlier.
Yeah, definitely. I would second everything that Sonia said, but I would also add, just to really leverage your existing resources, we had all the data for the map already, so it was just kind of pulling it together and making it public facing. And I did want to also mention the URL for the map, which I forgot to mention earlier. It's nyc.gov/textiles if anyone wants to check it out.
Great, great. Thank you so much, Sonia and Catherine and Ali, for joining us today. That was such an interesting session. And there's so much going on in this making fashion circular space at the moment. Just a reminder that if you're London, please go check out the pop-up shop at 7 Dials and 7 Dials. If you'd like to find out more about designing for circular fashion, you could join a workshop series run by the RSA and the Foundations Make Fashion Circular, supported by the People's Postcode Lottery, where you can join other students to tackle real-world problems. Also, don't forget about Re-Fashion Week in New York, February 22nd to 28, 2020 next year. And if you know of any other circular fashion events that are happening around the world, please also do put those in the comments box on the DIF website. We'd love to hear about those. So thank you so much to everyone who's joined us online as well. It's been a fantastic session, the last session of the 2019 DIF series, and you can catch up on everything that's happened on the DIF this week on the thinkdiff.co website. Please do go check out some other sessions. There's been some really fantastic content this week. That's it for 2019, and we'll see you next year in 2020.
We need to start making more conscious material choices.
Set up an initiative called Make Fashion Circular.
It's a tsunami of change.